Hey everybody, welcome to Art Club. I'm so excited to be teaching you guys some finger knitting this week. We're going to be making some cute little animals out of these finger knitting projects that we're doing. But the cool thing is, once you know how to finger knit, really you can make a whole bunch of different things, right? Like, so here's some finger knitting. You could make it into a cool headband or a necklace or maybe some friendship bracelets. There's so many fun things that you can make with finger knitting. And then to add to it, depending on the different yarns that you use, it can also create different sort of textures and thicknesses. So one thing I'm going to show you guys real quickly is sort of the difference between some different yarns. Now we, for Art Club, have a very thin yarn that's not fuzzy, so this is going to be a really good yarn to learn on, because it's not going to get like snagged with fluffy stuff coming out of it. It's really easy to see what you're doing. However, because it is a very thin yarn, you're going to notice that with your finger knitting you're going to see some gaps in between it like that, right? Which is okay, but it's just a matter of like just that finished look and kind of what you're going for. So it does definitely then give it some stretch too, which can be kind of nice depending on what you're making for your project. But I just want to show you the difference between a yarn like this versus this is a little bit thicker, fuzzier yarn, and you can see that it does not have as much space in between. Now another reason for that is I finger knitted this with my hands. My daughter, who is a couple years younger than me, let's see, I think when she finger knitted this one, she was maybe 8 years old, but she's much tinier fingers than me, right? So because of the size of her hands too, there's also a reason why the spaces in between are not as big. If I had used the same yarn, mine would have been just a bit bigger. You would have seen more spaces in between. You could use even thicker yarns yet, so like look at this. Because it's such a thick yarn, you really don't see any spaces in between. So just comparing the difference between those two yarns, and obviously you can see what a difference that makes in your finger knitting. So I just bring that up because I'm sure a lot of people have either seen different yarns at stores or maybe even have different yarns in your house. Once again, the yarn that I have for you guys is a great yarn to learn on, but feel free as you get more experience with finger knitting, which by the end of the week you're going to be cruising right along, but feel free to experiment with some different kinds of yarns as well, and see what happens as you're using those and the different textures and thickness and all that stuff that it provides. So let's start off with the basics on how to finger knit. It's pretty simple once you get going, and the cool thing about it is once you get going you really can almost do it mindlessly. Like, have you ever ridden a bike and at first you're like, okay, I'm going to, maybe it's a family member's house or your friend's house, and you're biking and you're like, okay, I have to go here, 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 but then after a while as you're biking you're almost just like daydreaming about different things, and then it's like all of a sudden, oh, I'm here, okay. And you like barely realize that, the last maybe mile or so you were biking but not really having to pay attention a lot. Finger knitting does that too. So I will actually finger knit, crochet while watching a movie, listening to an audio book. It's just a really almost meditative, relaxing thing you can do while even listening to or watching other things. So that's kind of cool. It's fun for that. So here's what I am going to do. I'm starting off with whatever color I want. This first project, remember, is going to be a snake. So whatever color you would like your snake to be. And I'm going to pinch my yarn right in between there. Now, I've heard of people also kind of tying a little knot there that then you can release. So if you're worried about, so I'm just tying it around there. If you're worried about simply holding it right here, you could also do that, where you just tie a real loose knot around your thumb. I usually just do this, so I just hold it between. All right, And eventually you don't need to hold this. This is only for the first couple of rounds while we're getting started, but then eventually you release it anyway. So my yarn is like this, okay? So it's coming, starting from my wrist, and then it's just kind of dangling back behind my hand right now. All right, so here's gonna be our pattern. We're always gonna go behind our pointer to start, in front of our middle, behind our ring, and in front of our pinky. So do you see how it goes behind, in front? Now on the way back, it's gonna be the opposite. Okay, so I'm going to loop it behind the pinky, in front of the ring, behind the middle, and in front of the pointer. So you can kind of see how it just looped around both sides like that. Okay, so for the first round while we're casting on, this is the only time we actually have to go down and back twice, but from there on out it's only down and back. Okay, so then I do have to go back down and back again. It's the same thing though. So in front of my middle, behind the ring, in front of the pinky, and around the back, in front of ring, behind the middle, in front of pointer. Okay, so this is what it should look like. It should be like there's two rows, right? Here was from the first time down and back, here's the second time down and back. So to do the knitting part now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this here, the bottom one, and we bend our finger to pull this up and over. So watch this. I'm going to take the bottom one, bend my finger, and it goes up and over. So now there's just the top one remaining. So same thing here, taking the bottom one, bending my finger, up and over. Take the bottom one, bend my finger, up and over, bottom one, bend my finger, up and over. So now I like to kind of reset. I just kind of push them all back down into place. So now this becomes the bottom row. So we got to make another down and back. So it's behind the pointer. Let me get enough slack here. Behind the pointer, in front of, middle, behind ring, in front of pinky, and around the back pinky, and in front of ring, behind middle, in front of pointer. So now we've got our two rows again, right? Here's from the one that was left over from last time. Here's my new one. I just went down and back, and I'm going to take the bottom one, bend my finger, up and over. Bottom one, over finger, bottom one, over finger, bottom one, over finger, and I like to reset it, just kind of by pulling it down. And sometimes I'll give a little tug there too, just so nothing's too loose. Okay, I'm going to do another row now. I'm just going to keep on going, and I'll show you what this looks like as we get a little further on. So I'm going to go a little faster here. Normally I would have some of this already like prepared, right? But with finger knitting, can't really do that. So I'm just going to make a few rows here. You guys can be working at your own speed, but I want to show you that end point. Like, what do we do when we're either completely done? Oh, and now, because I've gotten a few rows in, you guys, I don't need to hold on to this anymore. You can release that. But what do we do once we are done finger knitting? Either because you're actually, like, you've made it as long as you wanted it to, and you're actually ready to be done, or because you're like, oh my goodness, I need to go eat lunch, or I need to, go to my other classes, Mrs. Stinson. There's more than just art club. You expect me to have yarn on my finger for the rest of my life? No, I don't. So I will show you guys, there's two ways to cast it off, whether you're just trying to take it off momentarily or you're trying to actually finish the project. So I'll show you that in just a second. I'm going to do maybe two more rows before I show you how to stop. There we go. But you can see after a while it goes pretty quick once you have done it for a bit. And once again, it kind of becomes almost sort of mindless and meditative and relaxing, and you don't have to pay a ton of attention after you've done this for a while. Okay, so let's just pretend here's what it's looking like, right? And of course it can be pulled and stretched. So let's just pretend I'm like, okay, I have this much done. It's not enough for my project, but my next class is starting and I need to go. I can't like have this yarn on my hand. So here's how you take a temporary break. Grab something like a pencil, a crochet hook, something kind of the shape, and you're basically going to have your pencil replace your fingers. So you have to come from the bottom and kind of release it up your finger like that, okay? And then the same thing, so I kind of have to hook it back down, careful that you don't like lose it, right? We don't want to lose that. So I'm going to hook it back down and it's going to come and release it off of your finger like that. Okay, so there's the next one. Now this one, same thing. It's getting a little caught on the end there, okay? And then same thing here. So now I can take a break, but I usually, because I have 3 tiny humans, a cat and a dog at home, so I usually, if I'm taking a break for the night, we'll put a piece of tape over the top of that so that somebody doesn't run by and accidentally release it off of there, okay? So I might just put a piece of tape or put it somewhere safe so that nothing bad happens. Okay, when you're ready to put it back on, you just simply put your fingers back through like they were. So you want it to be behind, make sure it stays behind your hand, right? Oops, that's this one. There we go. And you just allow it to go back on each finger like that. And then you're back to where you started from. But let's say that I'm actually just ready to be done. Like this is how long I wanted it to be. I'm ready to finish this, ready to cast off. So what I'm going to do then is actually create about a 9-inch tail. So something like that. Boop, and we cut it off. Okay. Now I'm going to take this tail and just like I always do, I'm going to bring it in front of my middle finger. But instead of doing the back and forth, I'm actually going to take it, kind of like I did with my pencil, over to my pinky and come up from the bottom. So you see how it's coming up from the bottom like that? Okay. This is basically, it's creating a knot that's going to allow it to come off, but then not come unraveled. So it came up through the pinky. Now I'm going to have it come up through my pointer next. I'm going to skip my middle finger and go over to my pointer finger, do the same thing, have the string come up through the pointer finger, and then the last one I like to do is the middle finger, because that way the knot ends up in the middle of my knitting versus off on a side, and I just think it looks nicer through the middle. So now that it's gone through all 4 fingers, we can kind of like slowly release, and when you pull, it actually makes a little knot there. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's made a knot to keep it tight now. And now I've got a finger knitting. So that is where we're going to leave off for right now. But from here, you can see I could do a whole variety of things, right? That could turn into a bracelet. It could turn into a headband or whatever you want it to be. We're going to be turning this one into a snake. So we'll talk next time about adding the tongue and how to make yarn pom-poms for the eyes. So keep on finger knitting. You can make your snake as long as you want it to. If you want to make a whole snake family before our next class, you could do that too. Have fun, and I hope that you guys enjoy this.